Welcome to the Hour of Empowerment. Today we are in Season 3, which is Organizational Development, and Topic 1, Communication. And we are in Episode 4, Interview. We have a great communicator inside our studio. He is Glenn Garnes. He is the founder of Village Connector Media, the People's Prosperity Network. Glenn's mission is to use internet television, internet radio, and other media tools to deliver personal development content worldwide. His goal is to help people invest in themselves and to work together with others who are doing so. Glenn is an avid technology buff and a recognized expert on social media and internet marketing. He is frequently called on to speak on these topics internationally. Glenn, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me, Asakid.
I briefly introduced you, but would you please take a couple of minutes to explain about you and what you're doing?
Well, I tell you, you did such a great job. I'm thinking about having you come up and do that for me all the time.
All right. I look forward.
You're hired.
Thank you. That's great.
Well, as you know, we've been friends for a little while now.
Yes.
And
you're one of my mentors.
Well, well, listen, we learn from each other. If we, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So when you are open to learning, it's amazing who you can learn from.
Exactly.
But as you pointed out, I love technology and I love people. And I love helping people use technology to share messages, to communicate with each other, and basically to expand the opportunities for each other. And so everything that we're doing is centered around helping people improve themselves through personal development, as you pointed out. And of course, helping people to understand the power of aligning themselves with people around common interests.
You're a great communicator and you have been communicating with diverse people. What is the role of communication in your personal life and business?
Well, I mean, communication is the vehicle by which we create opportunities together. I mean, ideas come from having a discussion with someone, having a dialogue with someone. And what I find is that the role that communication plays is it creates an environment where we can explore together where there are opportunities for us to each reach our own goals. As you know from the teachings of Napoleon Hill, the definition of success is accomplishing your definite chief aim without violating the rights of others. And I like to think that accomplishing your definite chief aim by working together with others who are also looking to do for themselves what you're looking to do for yourself is the best way for you to advance humanity and advance, evolve as a person. So communication is the vehicle by which we do that.
So without communication, it is very hard for us to succeed and achieve our personal or organizational goals.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, think about it. If you're looking to work together in a team, every team has to have the ability to communicate. Sports teams often use signals,
yes,
or special codes and things of that nature. In this kind of a dialogue, we use language, of course, and that includes body language, it includes our verbal and spoken language, but it is communication nevertheless.
Let's talk about the role of listening. Some people may think that communication is all about you talking to the other person, but one of the most important components of communication is listening, active listening.
That's right. And I'm glad you said active listening, because most people that I meet initially, if they aren't students of the concept of active listening, they're listening to what you're saying just long enough for you to stop talking so that they can say what they want to say. Exactly. And so, especially when we go to networking events, you've seen this at some of the events that we've been to together.
I have been doing that too. I mean, you think always that you're communicating the more you talk, but it's not all about talking.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right. And so, if you think about it, when people are simply listening long enough for you to stop talking, the real question is who's really listening? So active listening means if you had nothing to say at the end of what somebody was about to tell you, you're just there to hear their thoughts, to hear their position, or to hear the information that they're going to share. And you're not sitting there preparing yourself to say something in response. Just like you were in a lecture in a classroom. Yeah. You're there to receive information. And so that causes you to be more tuned in to what's being said. And when you can listen intently in that fashion, people that you're talking to actually pick up on the fact that you're taking an active role in listening. It's called being present with them.
Being present
Being present means that you are ultimately there to receive the information and to consider it thoughtfully. You know, a lot of people, as I said, they're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can respond, or they feel a need to respond to what you just said instead of just considering it.
Or get distracted somewhere, or think about what's going on at home or somewhere else.
That's exactly
they're
right.
listening to the person talking. I saw you so many times that you listen. You listen to me, I know that, and also I watched you listening other people. When did you develop that, and how did you develop active listening?
Well, I had to learn that. That was not something, I was just like everyone else that used to go to business events and networking events. I was there to pitch my business and my law firm and what we were doing and things of that nature. And it was about 10 years ago, I read a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And he talked in that book about the importance of taking a sincere interest in others. And the best way for you to take a sincere interest in others is to put the focus on them. And that means listening. So I figured that the best way for me to learn how to take a sincere interest in others was to want to find out more about them. And the best way to do that was to listen to what was being said, listen to what was important to them. If you do talk, ask questions that logically follow from what they just told you. How many times have you found yourself in a conversation where you're saying something and then the next question somebody asks has nothing to do with what you were talking about? You really have to be focused. But if you focus on it and you develop it as a habit, you know that once you can convert something into a habit, it becomes part of who you are and not something that you have to consciously think about.
Paul Tillich said that the first primary duty of love is listening.
That's
so
right.
Even listening is a way of expressing your love and respect to others.
That's exactly right. And I'm glad you mentioned it that way, because good listeners and good communicators are always very heart-centered. They have a keen and sincere interest in people. And because of that, they want to hear what others have to say.
And they are not listening intellectually. They are listening using their heart.
That's exactly right. Now, here's something else that you need to think about from a communication standpoint. Verbal and visual communication is not the only way we communicate these days. We communicate through text messaging, through posts on social media outlets and things of that nature. And you can be just as good a listener in that role as you can, through the traditional methods, by simply asking questions that logically follow from something someone just posted. Someone posts an idea or an article or something, and you ask follow-up questions about it. What did you get out of that article? Why did you think this was important? You know, those types of questions show that you're sincerely focused on the value that they're looking to offer by making that post in the first place. I get more people connecting to me through, like, for example, LinkedIn, just by the thoughtfulness with which I engage them in dialogue on the internet.
Wow, it may not be synchronous because they're writing, you're reading and replying, but at least you have to make effort to ask questions. And that way you show them that you are listening and you are also following what they are saying.
And that's the easiest way to develop the skill, is to change your paradigm from being broadcasting to asking questions. Change from being responsive to asking a follow-up question. So if you feel the need to say anything at all, make it a question that logically follows from what was just said.
It's very important, in terms of training ourselves to listen, because it takes effort, it takes discipline. Once I heard John Maxwell, you know him?
Of course, one of my favorite.
Yes, and he said that he trained himself by writing the capital L at the top of his legal pad. Whenever he goes out to talk to people, he writes L at the top of the right corner of his legal pad, and whenever he's tempted to talk, he looks at that, and he reserved himself from talking.
Oh, so that reminds him.
That L reminds him to listen. Nice.
John Maxwell is one of my favorite authors,
Yeah.
and he's mostly on leadership.
Yes.
But one of the best books that he's ever written it's called Thinking for a Change. And so he has so many different things to teach. But I'm going to remember that one, though, because I'd never thought about that.
Oh,
but
yeah.
L is for listen. Put it right in the right corner.
One of the things I benefited from your organization and from you is watching you present, not in person and also virtually. And I watched you sharing stories. So what is the place of telling stories in communication?
Well, I think that when you look at stories, we are introduced to stories at a very early age because it's both educational and entertaining. And when people listen to stories, they have a tendency to listen more intently because they begin to visualize themselves being one of the characters in the story. I'll give you an example of that. I've recently done a workshop where I was presenting, and it was a PowerPoint presentation. And I could have gone through all of the different bullets on the PowerPoint, and people would have been writing notes, and that would have been good. But I stopped at one point, and I started to tell a story that illustrated the points that were on the bullets. And because I told a story, people started getting more intent. They started leaning forward and listening more intently. They stopped writing, and they paid attention to what we were talking about instead of just trying to write down everything that I was saying. And when I asked a few of the students afterwards what they thought was more effective, in the presentation, and they told me specifically they really liked the story. They asked why, and they said because we could see ourselves being the person you were talking about in the story. They start to visualize themselves getting the result that I was describing that this other client had gotten by following through on the things that I taught them to do. And that was much more compelling for them than just getting a list of things to do. So stories play a very important role because people visualize themselves becoming part of the story as opposed to just writing down information.
In myself, I saw that, I'm more interested to listen to story. Even when I read books, I like the part where the author shares stories of himself and the stories of others.
Sure.
So whenever we communicate with people, whether it is one-on-one or in group format, we should use stories.
Absolutely. Stories are, for one thing, they're more fun.
Yeah.
It's more fun when you're sharing and teaching to do it in the form of a story than just be communicating cold, hard information.
How can we develop that?
In terms of stories?
Yeah.
Well, stories for the most part when you're teaching are just examples of how someone has taken the information that you're sharing and actually used it. So when you think about it, most stories are a result of people actually going out and doing what they've been taught to do, and then someone telling the results that they got. In the business world, we call those case study testimonials as an example, where you talk about what the problem was, what they were doing before they met the problem solver, the consultant or the coach, and what the coach then introduced them to and showed them, how they went out and did it, and then what the result was afterwards. Now that's a story, but it's also educational to show people what's possible. So you can do that in virtually any environment. It doesn't matter what the environment is. I mean, we've had stories from the time that we were youngsters in school all the way through, today. So stories, developing the ability to tell a story simply means stopping to think about how the information that you're communicating actually impacts people in the real world. It takes it from theory to reality.
So it requires you to have a shift in your thinking that you extend your messages better if you use stories than, in a natural lecture way of expressing the idea or the concept.
Well, that's exactly right. When you're teaching someone, think about what is the purpose of sharing information with people so that they're better equipped to go out and get good results with that information. Now, if they're already seeing other people or hearing the stories of other people who have gotten their results, they're going to be much more likely to follow through on what you just shared with them, as opposed to just giving them cold information to write down on a pad and go home and duplicate. They're much more inspired to see somebody that has already traveled the path that they're about to travel and been successful with it.
I think it's also possible in any field to come up with some stories because, I give trainings, for example, in IT field, and it's a little bit difficult to create some kind of stories, but you could be able to do that rather than just talking about the different parts of, for example, the computer and how they work and what kind of troubleshooting you should make. You can create stories of how you face some problems and which part of the computer created some kind of challenge or whatever. That way you could be able to easily teach them
That's exactly
what computer is and how it functions than just showing them the picture of computer and say, this is the part that does this part do that, this part does that. It's better to create some kind of stories.
That's
and
exactly
explain
right.
the concept.
That's exactly right. And I was actually talking yesterday with a friend of mine. We were going over the features of a customer relationship marketing system, a software program that allows you to stay in touch with people by tracking your contacts with them. And she was showing me all the things it can do. It does this, it does this, it does this. And I said back to her, that's what a restaurant would use to stay in touch with their customers between visits to the restaurant. This is how a plumber would use. And so she started to say, wow, I didn't think of it from that perspective. So I started to visualize, for my own purposes, how someone would actually use all those tools to build something. You see, you can give a toolkit to 100 people, and if you don't show them what it's possible to use that toolkit to build, then they're not inspired with any type of idea about why it's relevant to them.
Exactly.
If you show them what's possible to build with the toolkit, then they're more inspired to pick the tools up and work with them. And that's what storytelling does, is it inspires people to pick up the tools and work with them.
That's great. That's great. One thing I have seen at Village Connectors is there are diverse people from diverse cultures. That shows me that you have cross-cultural communication skill to connect with people from diverse cultures, including myself.
Yes, of course.
What is the secret behind? How did you succeed in doing that?
Well, I don't know that there's a secret. I think that when you're heart-centered, you attract heart-centered people. And when you attract heart-centered people, cultural differences, ways of life, they become less significant. So everyone feels welcome, everyone feels included. And you're right, at Village Connector, that's our mission, is to get people to stop focusing on the things that make us different and start focusing on the things we have in common. We still celebrate the things we have that are different, especially some of the cultural exchange that we have, but we start by finding common ground. When you focus on common ground, what that does is it builds trust with each other, so that when you start having to speak about things that maybe you differ on, you at least have enough respect for each other that you can discuss those things objectively and not be offended or not be separated by them. So from our perspective, I don't know that there's any secret to it. I think that it all starts again with two things: being heart-centered and having a sincere interest in other people. Another way to express that would be this: if you consider yourselves to be on a journey of continuous learning, if you make a commitment to be teachable and open to change, those two things, then you'll start to see new opportunities from people that you interact with, new opportunities to learn. That's I was fascinated to find out that in your country you were a veterinarian.
Yeah, my background.
But you've never had a pet because in your culture it's not common to have pets.
Yeah.
And I went back and replayed that because here in the United States, vets are primarily working with people's pets.
Yeah.
So that was fascinating to me. Now, if I wasn't open to learning new things,
you would be surprised. Why?
That would have gone right over my head.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But by the way, I was asked during the Between the Covers program, they asked me which pet is your favorite.
Right.
I don't. I didn't have a pet. So.
But I think you said sheep, right?
But I prefer sheep. Dog is common here in the United States. Back home in our country, we have sheep, goats, and so on.
And
we are more closer to.
That's a perfect example. Here in the United States, cows are actually a source of food and sustenance for us. In India, I understand that they are sacred.
Yeah.
And so, if we allowed our relationship with our Indian neighbors to focus on how we perceive the cow, and that became something that divided us, we might never have the opportunity to exchange ideas and information on other things.
And connect with them.
Exactly.
That means it requires some kind of effort to learn other cultures.
That's exactly right. And that's why it's so important that we learn how to develop trust and respect for each other, regardless of what things we may do differently.
Exactly. So it's first about your heart. You love people. If you love them, you ignore the difference between you and them, and then you make some kind of effort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that we would ignore the differences. I would say that we don't allow the differences to keep us from developing a relationship.
That's a good point, yes, because you can't really avoid differences,
Right.
because you have been brought up in different cultures, and different cultures, they have different value settings.
That's right. It's actually great when you really mature yourself into being heart-centered to celebrate those differences. See, a lot of times people, when they see something that's different, they're fearful of it because it's not familiar to them. But by putting yourself in a position of perpetual learning, the best way to remove fear of something is to educate yourself on it. Now it removes the mystery, and now there's nothing to be fearful of.
Especially in the 21st century.
That's
because
right.
now more people are working together in person and also virtually. And you're going to meet people from
right.
different culture. The world is globalized. Here is internet. And you are exposed to people from diverse culture. If you are not effective enough to communicate with diverse people, that means you may not be able to succeed at work,
That's right.
in your business.
You limit your possibilities. You limit your potential for achieving success when you limit your mindset. It's all about your mindset. It's an attitude adjustment issue for the most part. I mean, think about it. With 3 button clicks, you can be talking to someone anywhere across the globe that has internet access. If you're offended or you're concerned or fearful of how their lifestyle is where they are, you're limiting the value of having that technology available to you. That's one of the reasons why we're so focused on using internet television, internet radio, and online newspaper to unite the world rather than divide it the way that some of the other media sources typically do. And that's what I love about what you do here, is that you're bringing Western education to other parts of the world, especially in Ethiopia is what this particular network is about.
Yes.
But that cultural exchange allows us to better understand each other. And it's a gift on both sides of the coin.
Yeah, you know, I came from Ethiopia, which is almost the opposite of the United States, which is a communal culture. Here it's an individual-based culture, and it took me some time to understand the culture, to mix with people, learn new things, and befriend and colleague with people like yourself. I mean, great people. If I was not ready to embrace a different culture, it would have been very difficult. As you say, that's why we are opening these kind of programs at ESAT, so that Ethiopians and other people who are listening our program to understand that it is very important to cross cultures. That's very critical.
And it's an enriching opportunity for people who will embrace that. You never understand how much your life becomes enriched by understanding the way other people do things.
Exactly.
Yeah, we see that in medicine here all the time. Western medicine was supposed to be the best thing on the planet, and there are a lot of things that don't get solved with Western medicine that other types of medicine address. Acupuncture, meditation, aromatherapy, all these things that were foreign in terms of the mainstream use of them in Western medicine. Now, every hospital I know has an acupuncture department,
Exactly. So, I mean, there are great things in every culture. So this is our responsibility to identify those great things and embrace them and benefit, as you say, from that experience of exposing ourselves to diverse cultures.
That was very well said, and I agree with you 100% on that.
Let's talk about technology. Now, you may be savvy when it comes to technology. If you don't really know how to connect with people from diverse culture, it's going to be very hard. I mean, technology can't help you. For example, if you want to communicate with someone using email, for example, I mean, you still should have some kind of cross-cultural communication competency to connect and exchange idea with someone from another culture.
Oh, absolutely. See, technology is simply a tool. It is the highway, it is the tool, it is the vehicle by which we connect. You still have to understand and be willing to open yourself to understanding people, to understanding what it takes to develop trust and respect with people so that you do have an open dialogue. Again, when people trust and respect you, they're a little bit more forgiving when you do something that might not have been socially acceptable because they know what was in your heart.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why it's so important to be heart-centered. It's a lot easier to forgive someone when you know that they had no intention of trying to offend you, regardless of what actually happened. And if you're open to receiving feedback from people that say, well, that's not how we do it here, this is our way. If you don't allow yourself to be offended by receiving that information, that's where you position yourself to learn.
You're right.
That's why I think that one of the most important things anyone can do is to learn their own culture, but learn the culture of someone else's background as well.
Yeah.
I was fortunate in college to study in the Dominican Republic for a summer,
Wow.
which gave me the opportunity to live with a family there, to immerse myself in the culture of the Dominican Republic, which was relatively comparable
Yeah.
to the United States, but there were some very big differences. And I had to learn those differences. And those differences, they enriched my life to know that what I thought was, the only way is nowhere near the only way. But it also opened my eyes to, well, it's different in the Dominican Republic, it's different in Japan, it's different in Ethiopia, it's different in South Africa. We need to be aware of all of those differences so that we're on the lookout for opportunities to learn.
Yeah, you're right. It's very important also to understand that there are subcultures under cultures. Even in Ethiopia, for example, there are subcultures in the different parts of Ethiopia. So if we want to learn the culture of Ethiopia, we should not really stop at the top level. We should go also a level down, understand the subcultures in that culture. The same in the United States. Yes, there is a bigger culture which defines the United States, but the culture in the northern part of the United States may be different a little bit in the south and so on.
Even in different parts of states, the culture can be very different. And that's why I think that the people that find it easiest to be heart-centered are the ones that consider themselves to make their life about the journey of constant learning. People that are always on the lookout to learn are the ones that I find have the easiest time being heart-centered because they're sincerely looking to constantly improve themselves by learning just a little bit more.
Yes. The learning also should not stop at the country level. For example, in the same city, there are different organizations, and there are organizational cultures, and one organizational culture is different than another one. And if I'm an employee, I should be smart enough to understand the culture of that organization to succeed.
That's exactly right. And see, you're bringing these things to people's attention. When they go to work tomorrow or after they've watched this episode, they're going to look at their work environment, the organizations they belong to and support, people in their neighborhoods and communities are going to look at them through a whole different light because you're shedding light on what it takes for people to really learn to be, you learn to use communication to be productive together. It's hard to be productive with someone until you understand them. And that usually means making them a friend before you try to make them a customer, or letting people get to know you before they get to know your business.
Exactly. We have been taught about emotional intelligence, the ability to discern and also to connect with people at emotional level. But in the 21st century, it's also important to embrace cultural intelligence.
Yes.
Like emotional intelligence, so that not only you connect at emotional level, you also connect at cultural level.
Well, it's easier to connect at an emotional level when you take the time to understand the culture, because you understand the motivations behind what people do,
they reinforce
why things are important to them. Absolutely.
But communication is a little bit challenging because that's why not all of us are successful when it comes to communication. What are the major barriers that keep people from really benefiting from communication?
I think the major barriers are kind of what we started with, but so many of us fail to have the patience or the thoughtfulness to understand where there's a benefit for us to develop a heart-centered approach to our relationships with people. It sounds too warm and fuzzy, if you will, or too emotional.
Yeah.
What really happens when you open yourself up to be teachable is that you start to understand other people. You're not just putting yourself in their shoes. You're understanding what motivates and inspires them, and that allows you to have influence with them and for them to have influence with you. And when you have influence with each other, that's where you can really fully explore ideas, fully explore opportunities.
Yes.
Just like with Village Connector, what we're building there is not just what I came up with. It's what everyone that comes into that organization adds to the mix. And all of that addition of people and resources and ideas and skills and information makes it better for the entire community. None of that would happen if the people that are coming into our world weren't patient, weren't open to learning, and weren't heart-centered in their approach. So the first thing I think that is important is to be open to learning. You have to be open to learning. When you're open to learning and you're not limited in who you think you can learn from, you start to develop a more heart-centered view towards other people. And when you're heart-centered in the people that you meet, it becomes very easy for you to be a good communicator, because you're communicating with a purpose, and the purpose is not just to benefit yourself, it's to benefit others as well.
The keyword here, purpose. Would you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah. Purpose simply means that you have an intention to accomplish something that is going to benefit you and the people that you interact with. So communication is a two-way street. Communication with purpose means that you're looking to benefit not just yourself in that communication, but the other people with whom you're communicating.
So that you develop a win-win scenario.
Exactly. Everyone has to benefit for something to be a worthy ideal. Otherwise, we're preying on each other instead of preying with each other.
So if we can't really overcome these barriers, we can't really maximize and benefit from communication. As we talked before, that if you want to succeed in your personal and organizational goals, you should use communication as a pathway, as a way, as a means to succeed. So if you're not dealing with the barriers, you can't really maximize the benefits. So what are the practical steps? For example, someone is struggling to become a great communicator. Where to start? What kind of things to do? Where to go or what to do to succeed and become great communicators?
I think probably the most important place for people to start, I'm going to recommend 2 books that I think are a great place to start. And those books, the role of those books would help you to understand the importance of investing effort, time and effort, in developing a heart-centered approach to what you do. 2 of the best books ever written, or one is by Napoleon Hill. It's called The Law of Success in 16 Lessons. You know that's a book that I teach out of. And one of the most important lessons in that book, Dr. Hill calls developing a pleasing personality. Do you know how he says that you should develop a pleasing personality? The number one thing that he recommends is taking a sincere interest in other people. So if you understand the importance of delaying your own immediate gratification and giving someone else the spotlight, giving someone else the opportunity to be up front. If you can appreciate and understand how you will benefit by actually giving someone else the opportunity to express themselves, then you can begin the process of taking advantage of communication and using it in a way that benefits everyone involved in the communication. So many times we want people to hear our position, to hear us, to understand what we're trying to say. But we're not taking the time to extend that privilege to them as well. So if we can maturely be willing to take the first step in faith, so to speak, meaning that we're willing to be the one to be the good listener first, it opens up all kinds of doors. So I would say learn how to be the good listener first. Now the other book I wanted to recommend is actually by Dale Carnegie. I mentioned it earlier, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He also has a chapter on pleasing personality. And he talks the same way. It's the same message that Dr. Hill has, but I think sometimes hearing it from 2 different people helps you to understand the importance of it. When multiple people are all saying the same thing, there's more likely to be truth in it.
By the way, the book which is Winning People and Influence Friends.
How to win friends.
How to win friends
and influence people.
Influence people. That was a book that launched me to the journey of communication. It was in the early 90s. I read that book and I was convinced that communication is very important. And I remember the first step I took. It was convincing my youngster colleagues and friends to establish a youth organization.
Wow.
I was sweating. I talked, for 5 minutes, but it looked like I was talking like forever. I was scared. I was sweating. And I wanted even to run away. I was so scared to communicate with them. A simple idea of having an organization. But after that, I went to different organizations like Toastmasters, the National Speakers Association, and so on and so on.
Well, see, your own story is pretty compelling because you were willing to acknowledge that you needed to learn more, you needed to grow, and you consciously went out and sought that learning, and then you actively put it into play. You actively went out and did the things you were learning and developed it as a skill that became part of who you are. And that's what makes you so effective as a communicator, is that you have eaten your own cooking, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
You practice what you preach.
Because because the book convinced me the benefits of communication.
That's right.
That's why I took risk. That's why we need this discussion, because people should know that a successful person like you invested lots of effort to become a great communicator. And without communication, you couldn't have been here.
You know what? I wouldn't say that I invested a lot of effort.
You gave your heart.
I gave my heart,
Yeah.
but I invested time in taking the time to understand why it was important. Once I understood why it was important, the steps were actually pretty easy. But it was taking the time to understand why this is important. How would this benefit me in making me better at who I am, making me the best person that I can be? And once I understood how I would benefit, and I also saw that I would benefit others in developing that skill, the steps were actually pretty easy. It's not hard to be a good listener.
Yeah. You see, the initial step is very critical for me, and I believe for everybody, because normally as humans, we react to pain or pleasure.
That's right.
If we don't understand that there are pains because of our lack of communication, and if we don't understand that there are benefits,
that's right.
Benefits when we become great communicators. That book unleashed me, because I could be able to see that there are benefits that are, important to me, to my community, to other people. That convinced me that whatever the pain could be, I don't mind. I will take the step. And by the way, I didn't stop learning about communicating that stage. I learned it throughout my life, and still, every day I try to improve my communication skill. Let me give you an example. Now here I'm in the United States. English is my second language. And I am communicating with Americans like yourself. I wanted to be understood. I can't be, a native speaker at this stage, because you have to come in the United States or somewhere else and speak English maybe at the early stage of your life, like when you are a teenager or something like that. For me, it is too late, but I can learn at least to be understood. And one of the things I'm making to communicate with Americans, because I'm in America, I'm communicating with Americans, is to acquire the American accent. You see, and every day I go online, and also I buy books, CD-ROOMs, and try to see where I should improve. And also I watch my videos and see where I stumbled. And also ask people feedback, where am I stumbling? Where is the problem? Can you help me? Some people, very generous. They tell me, hey, Asagir, you are pronouncing this way. This is the British way. If you want to really speak in the American way, why don't you pronounce it this way? Some of the pronunciations are very tough. For example, myself and many of Ethiopians, we pronounce, for example, world. It's not world. So it was very difficult for me to learn to say world.
But see, your story is very compelling, because you took the time to do it. You made a commitment. You understood that it was important, and you made the commitment to make it a priority. And so anyone that understands the importance of something and makes it a priority to follow through can be successful. And in communication is just one of those things that you can be successful at when you make the commitment.
That's great. Let's talk about teams and organizations and businesses, because
Sure.
we have been talking about the benefit and the challenges of communication when it comes to each and every individual. Let's talk about the benefits. How, for example, a team or an organization or a business develop communication and connect within the organization, within the team, and also with the outside world.
Well, internally, most businesses, most companies, they have a need for people to first understand what it is they've been brought onto the team to do. But they need to understand the big picture too. What is it that I do? What is the relevance of what I do to all these other things, the mission of the company? In other words, even the receptionist that answers the phone at the front desk needs to understand why that's important to the big mission of the company. And then when people understand where they're relevant, they understand that they need to work well with others to make their relevance have an impact. So usually what I find is that most companies, they compartmentalize too much. The receptionist doesn't really talk with the management level, except when they're handing their mail or giving them their telephone calls. So they really don't have a dialogue or an understanding of what each other does. In my opinion, the level of communication within a company needs to be such that the receptionist understands exactly what everybody else does, so that he or she knows where they fit in and how they can help that person to be the best they can be at what they do. And of course, that also means having a mutual respect. Remember, we talked about the fact that communication starts when you are heart-centered and you have a sincere interest in others. You have to have a sincere interest in everyone in the company so that you want them to win as much as you want to win. And when you have a sincere interest in others, then communication starts to kind of take on a life of its own, because you're there to be helpful to other people. When you do that, whether you're doing it individually with people you meet at networking events, you should start doing it with the people that are in your company. And when everyone has a heart-centered approach within the company, it becomes part of the culture of the company. And now the company excels because everyone is looking to win together, as opposed to winning at someone else's expense.
You're right. Inside the organization, it's very important to have that kind of alignment. As you said,
that's a great way to express alignment.
Yes, because if we don't align, you distort or even damage the brand of the organization. It's
That's
very
right.
important. Also, there may be some kind of miscommunication, and these kind of things also affect performance, and so on and so forth.
That's often expressed as being office politics, where people are pitted against each other because they're not taking the time to get to know each other, to develop trust with each other, and they allow themselves to be divided even within a company. And so the same barriers to communication that exist outside of the company exist within the company itself, because people come from the outside world and they bring those habits, those traits, those characteristics into the work environment. And it's as important that they break them down there as it is that they break them down outside the work environment. So whether a company is looking to enhance communication within the company or working to enhance their communication with the larger community, it all starts with taking a heart-centered approach to what they're doing. If they truly believe that they offer value to their customer and offer value to the people they serve, then it's easier for them to be heart-centered in their approach with those people, and that kind of sets the stage for communication to be more effective.
That means organizations, teams, and businesses should make some effort to help their people also communicate uniformly. For example, by giving trainings, once per year or twice per year. Oh, yes,
absolutely.
And also by having a communication strategy where people know how to communicate and who should be the one communicating when this happens and so on.
Even hosting events where people get a chance to get to know each other on a personal level and not just in the context of what they do at work. Very few people today, especially in large companies, know what the person sitting next to them does, or knows what's important to them. If they know that they have kids, it's only because there may be a picture sitting on their desk. But they don't talk with them about it because they're supposed to stay focused on what they're doing for the company. So giving people a break from the normal routine and letting them get a chance to know each other on a more personal level develops bonds. And the bonding is what causes people to take a sincere interest in each other.
One of the things, by the way, I like from Village Connectors is you create that kind of atmosphere for people to come together and connect. It's not like other forms of networking. You give enough time for people to communicate and know each other. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was very important to me when I created Village Connector, was that I wanted to create an environment where where people were more focused on getting to know each other than just getting to know each other's businesses. Because once you take a sincere interest in people, you get to know them on a personal level, you naturally have an incentive to want to know about what they do professionally and how you can help with that. But so many of us focus exclusively on what we do for a living because that's what generates revenue for us. When we don't realize that if I like you as a person, I'm going to help you to do whatever you do for a living.
Yeah.
But if I only know about your business, if I don't like what you do, then you're not relevant to me. So that's why it's important to let people get to know you before they get to know your business. Mm-hmm. What if your business is computers? And that's all people know about you is that you're in the computer business and they don't need a computer. Then you decide to move into some other field of endeavor. But if they only know about you in the context of computers, they don't even know what you do now. But if they know you personally, then they know when you've made the shift into something new. And if they like you, they'll buy whatever you do, regardless of what it is. It's just a matter of the relationship that you develop with them that will determine their comfort level with trusting you that you're going to do a good job for them.
Well, we discussed wonderful ideas. Do you have any last minute tip or suggestion to our audience?
Yeah, I think that my suggestion would be to think about the things that you and I have talked about here today. And when I say think about them, I'm talking about go back and reflect on them. Think about whether you are doing these things in your life. And if you aren't doing them in your life, make a commitment, make a decision to do them, because that's where the benefit comes. None of these things will happen for you. You will not be a great communicator.
Yeah.
You will not develop the skills you need to succeed unless you make a commitment to make this part of what you do and translate that into who you are and who you can become. So make a commitment to understand these things and then make them part of who you are.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Glenn.
My
really,
pleasure.
I enjoyed our discussion and I look forward to talk to you with another program in the future.
I would be delighted to come back.
Thank you.
We'll
thank
always
you.
have plenty of things to talk about.
Yes, thank you very much. We have concluded our topic on communication. As you listened and watched, we had a wonderful time with Glenn. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. Next time, we're going to start a new topic. Until I see you next time, have a wonderful time. Thank you very much for watching.